The era of "you only live once" promised freedom through consumption. But for today's young adults, that promise has collapsed under rising prices and economic uncertainty. In its place emerges a new logic: you only need one. The YONO Tribe is not rejecting desire. It is learning how to survive in a system where spending feels increasingly risky. For much of the past decade, consumption among young people was defined by the ethos of "you only live once." Spending freely on experiences, self-indulgence, and lifestyle upgrades was framed as a form of self-care and personal fulfillment. Social media amplified this narrative, rewarding visibility, novelty, and excess. Today, that logic is being quietly dismantled. Across South Korea, a new consumer identity is taking shape, one defined not by abundance, but by restraint. Known as the "you only need one" movement, this shift reflects a generational recalibration of values in response to prolonged inflation, stagnant wages, and economic uncertainty. For the YONO Tribe, consumption is no longer a celebration of freedom, but a site of careful calculation. This transformation is not merely behavioral. It signals a deeper structural change in how young people perceive security, responsibility, and the future itself. Rising prices, shrinking confidence. Consumer price data illustrates the economic pressure shaping this movement. Since 2020, consumer prices in South Korea have risen steadily, reaching an index of 114.2 in 2024. While inflation accelerated, wage growth failed to keep pace, resulting in declining real income for many households, particularly among younger workers. According to Asia Business Daily, consumer prices increased by 6.5% over just 2 years beginning in 2022. For individuals in their 20s and 30s who often occupy entry-level or non-regular employment positions, this imbalance translated directly into reduced purchasing power and heightened financial anxiety. A 2024 survey conducted by gig economy platform New Worker found that 88.4% of respondents believed their financial situation had worsened due to rising prices and increased tax burdens. Nearly half reported experiencing significant or moderate financial strain. These numbers reveal a generation not merely tightening its belt, but questioning the sustainability of everyday life. The emergence of the YONO Tribe. The YONO Tribe is predominantly composed of individuals in their 20s and 30s who consciously limit consumption to what they consider essential. According to a Korea Broadcast Advertising Corporation survey conducted in December 2024, 80.7% of respondents stated that they actively avoid non-essential purchases and buy only what they need. Unlike traditional frugality, YONO is not simply about spending less. It is about evaluating, curating, and sharing consumption decisions. Purchases are scrutinized for price efficiency, durability, and necessity. Every transaction becomes a small act of judgment. This mindset stands in direct contrast to YOLO culture, where YOLO emphasizes immediacy and pleasure. YONO prioritizes endurance and foresight. Consumption is no longer aspirational, it is defensive. Frugality as rational adaptation. The rise of the YONO Tribe is best understood as a rational response to structural constraints. With economic growth slowing and employment prospects uncertain, young consumers are adjusting their behavior accordingly. Frugality in this context is not moral virtue signaling, it is economic self-preservation. Kim Ye-ryong, a student at Kyung-hee University, describes how everyday decisions have changed. Once accustomed to buying snacks and instant meals without much thought, she now compares product sizes, unit prices, and cost efficiency ratios before making purchases. Her behavior reflects a broader trend. Consumption decisions are increasingly data-driven. This emphasis on efficiency signals a shift from emotional to analytical consumption. Desire is filtered through affordability, and impulse is subordinated to calculation. Consumption patterns of the YONO Tribe. Low consumption in daily life. Food, transportation, and clothing are the primary areas where YONO consumers cut costs. Convenience store meals and budget-friendly food options have become popular tools for minimizing daily expenses. As of April 2024, convenience store sales rose by 5.9% year-over-year, with budget beverages and meal replacement products increasing by 7.3%. Transportation habits have also shifted. According to Nonghyup Bank, taxi usage among people in their 20s and 30s dropped by 21% in the first half of 2024, far exceeding reductions seen in other age groups. This indicates a deliberate move toward public transportation as a cost-saving strategy. Meanwhile, rental car usage surged by 258%, reflecting a preference for flexible yet economical mobility. Fashion, coffee, and the decline of excess industries traditionally associated with discretionary spending have not been immune. Data from NH Nong Hyuk Card shows that spending at budget coffee chains increased by 37% in 2023, signaling a shift away from premium cafes toward affordability. In fashion, private label apparel brands have gained traction. These brands reduce costs through integrated manufacturing and distribution, offering minimalist designs at lower prices. According to Dalian News, searches for such brands surged by nearly 2,000% year over year. This pattern suggests not the disappearance of fashion consumption, but its transformation from trend-driven to function-oriented. The rise of secondhand and sustainable consumption. Secondhand marketplaces have become central to the YONO ecosystem. Platforms such as Banggejangter and Jungonara recorded growth rates of 9.9% and 11.6% respectively, adding tens of thousands of new users. The appeal lies not only in lower prices, but also in transparency and trust. Real user reviews, local transactions, and direct communication reduce perceived risk. For YONO consumers, secondhand purchasing is not a compromise, it is an intelligent alternative. Beyond resale, sustainability practices such as using reusable containers and minimizing waste have gained popularity. These behaviors allow YONO consumers to align economic discipline with environmental responsibility, reinforcing the moral legitimacy of frugality. Social media, from display to discipline. During the YOLO era, social media platforms functioned as stages for showcasing luxury and excess. In the YONO era, they have become tools for accountability and peer learning. KakaoTalk's open chat rooms dedicated to frugal living now attract tens of thousands of participants. Some groups exceed 23,000 members who openly share monthly expenses, exchange budgeting tips, and humorously critique unnecessary spending. Financial goals are displayed alongside usernames, turning personal finance into a collective project. Instagram and YouTube further amplify this culture through challenges such as the No Spend Challenge. Participants document days or weeks without discretionary spending, sharing homemade meal routines and budgeting reflections. As of February 2025, the Korean hashtag for No Spending Challenge had accumulated over 15,000 posts. These platforms normalize restraint, transforming what was once private anxiety into shared experience. Criticism and psychological costs. Despite its perceived rationality, the YONO movement is not without criticism. Some argue that excessive frugality can generate stress, inconvenience, and emotional fatigue. Constant self-monitoring may erode enjoyment and spontaneity. Lee Sok-min, a student in Kyunghee University's School of Tourism and Entertainment, acknowledges this tension. While he recognizes the benefits of cutting wasteful spending, he warns that extreme thriftiness can become mentally exhausting. Critics also caution against romanticizing frugality, arguing that it risks masking deeper structural problems. When restraint becomes a necessity rather than a choice, responsibility subtly shifts from institutions to individuals. Beyond lifestyle, a structural signal. Ultimately, the YONO tribe represents more than a change in spending habits. It reflects a generational response to economic stagnation, weakened safety nets, and diminishing upward mobility. Frugality has become a language through which young people articulate insecurity, responsibility, and realism. The movement challenges the assumption that consumption equals happiness and exposes the fragility of an economy that depends on constant spending. Conclusion: living carefully in an uncertain economy. The rise of the YONO tribe marks a defining moment in contemporary consumer culture. As inflation persists and economic uncertainty deepens, young people are rewriting the rules of consumption, not out of preference, but necessity. This shift does not signal the end of desire, but the discipline of it. The challenge ahead lies in ensuring that financial responsibility does not come at the cost of well-being, and that systemic reform accompanies individual adaptation. In an era where buying less feels safer than dreaming more, the YONO movement stands as both a warning and a mirror, reflecting the realities young people are forced to navigate in an increasingly uncertain economic landscape. Market responses: how industries are adapting to the YONO consumer. As the YONO tribe grows in size and influence, markets are being forced to adapt. Traditional business models built on volume, impulse buying, and frequent upgrades are increasingly misaligned with consumer behavior that prioritizes durability, necessity, and price efficiency. In response, companies across sectors are recalibrating their strategies, not to encourage more spending, but to justify spending at all. Retailers, for instance, are shifting away from aggressive promotional cycles toward value-based branding. Budget coffee chains emphasize consistency and affordability rather than ambience or novelty. Convenience stores expand private label products that offer acceptable quality at lower prices, positioning themselves as rational choices rather than indulgent ones. This strategic repositioning reflects a recognition that emotional appeal alone is no longer sufficient to persuade cautious consumers. In the fashion industry, the impact is particularly pronounced. Fast fashion brands, once dominant among young consumers, now face growing skepticism over quality, durability, and ethical concerns. The surge in interest for private label apparel brands suggests that YONO consumers are not abandoning fashion, but reframing it as a functional good rather than a status symbol. Clothing is increasingly evaluated on cost per wear rather than trend relevance. Importantly, these shifts signal a broader transformation in how value is constructed in the market. Price is no longer the sole determinant. Transparency, longevity, and efficiency now function as competitive advantages. Generational psychology, managing anxiety through control. Beyond economics, the YONO movement also reflects a psychological dimension. In an environment where major life outcomes, stable employment, home ownership, long-term security feel increasingly out of reach, controlling everyday spending offers a sense of agency. For many young adults, budgeting and frugality function as coping mechanisms. Tracking expenses, setting no-spend goals, and participating in online frugality communities provide structure in an otherwise uncertain landscape. These practices transform anxiety into measurable action. Even small savings become symbols of self-efficacy. However, this emphasis on control carries emotional risks. When every purchase is subject to scrutiny, decision fatigue can set in. The constant need to optimize spending may blur the line between prudence and self-denial. What begins as rational adaptation can, in extreme cases, lead to guilt associated with any form of enjoyment. This tension highlights an important paradox of the YONO movement. While it empowers individuals to manage scarcity, it also reveals how deeply scarcity has become internalized. Inequality and the limits of choice. While often framed as a lifestyle trend, the YONO movement also exposes widening inequality within the same generation. Not all young people practice frugality by choice. For many, it is the only viable option. Higher income individuals may adopt YONO principles selectively, cutting back in some areas while still investing in experiences, education, or wellness. Lower income individuals, by contrast, often experience frugality as constraint rather than strategy. This distinction matters as it shapes who benefits psychologically from the movement and who bears its heaviest burdens. There is also a risk that celebrating frugality as virtue obscures structural responsibility. When restraint is praised without context, economic hardship can be reframed as personal discipline rather than systemic failure. In this way, YONO culture may unintentionally normalize conditions that should instead provoke policy intervention.